guys, welcome to another episode of the Planeswalkers Pub. I'm your host, Aaron.
I'm Aaron.
Howdy, it's RJ. Today, we are going to be talking about the different power levels of commander decks and how to power up or power down your current deck. But first, let's talk about our signature card.
Yes, every episode of the Planeswalkers Pub will feature a signature card that may or may not relate to the topic at hand.
Today's signature card is Balance of Power. Balance of Power is a sorcery for 3 and 2 blue. It states, if target opponent has more cards in hand than you, draw cards equal to the difference. To empty your mind is to fill your grave.
Yeah, it's a real... For starters, that flavor text is awesome. But it's a cool card if it's like the... Because everyone knows about the whole like top deck mode where you're just like, I'm just drawing one card, play land, go. Like, you know, something in that sense. With this, you're basically just targeting the person with the most cards in hand. You've now got a full grip again. You can now start replaying Magic. Yeah.
And in your pod, you probably have someone running Thought Vessel, Reliquary Tower, and running a bunch of draw cards. So you're definitely going to find use for this.
Yeah.
I was thinking of, you know, some people who draw out almost their entire deck, like...
What, so like Into the Infinite or something like that?
Yeah, and like, sure, me too.
Yeah, right.
And you just draw out your whole hand.
But this is Sorcery Speed, and if they draw their entire deck, you're probably lost the game already.
Yeah. No, I know that, but I like going to Christmas land. Yeah, it's the middle of July.
Yeah.
Christmas in July.
Alright, so before we actually start this episode, let me just say, RJ's back.
Hi!
Welcome back.
How was the Commander game?
I want to die. Let's just say, turn 4, 5 Platinum Angels, 12-person game, really not fun. But you know what? I didn't care. Turn 8, Mycosynth Lattice, Vandal Blast.
I feel it.
Yeah.
I feel it. I really feel it.
Life is good.
Alright, so let's get into the main topic at hand, which is different levels of Commander decks. Last week's podcast, we actually talked about Core 19 and everything in that sense, and Eric and I kind of went back and forth a little bit on our theories of how the power level should work between things. So this week, I just wanted to give a list of the different power levels that we see in most Commander decks.
First, we want to say the scale is not set in stone, and what we feel is casual or optimized might be different than what you think.
The power scale is jank, casual, focused, optimized, and competitive.
So let's start off at the bottom of the scale, or the first thing at the very least, at Jank. Power level for this is technically 1 to 2. Jank basically says, the example we're given for Jank is just like grabbing one color from like just your shoebox underneath of your bed, just grabbing a bunch of cards from that, toss them in the deck, and just running it.
No focus.
No just like...
That's not necessarily true. Art decks or theme decks
Can also be classified as Jank as well,
like
because...
left-handed tribal, ladies facing left, hoodie tribal.
Hoodie tribal.
Can you make a hoodie tribal?
I've heard of hoodie tribal because apparently the new Lazov has a hoodie, and someone wanted to make hoodie tribal, so...
Technically, Lazov has any hoodie because he's a shapeshifter.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
He has all the hoodies all at once. Jank, for the most part, it's not the fact that Jank decks can't win. It's just one of those things that their main goal isn't to win. Their main goal is kind of just like, hey, I'm going to show off this cool art from, like, you know, Seth McKinnon or something in that sense.
My Weatherlight deck that I'm never going to build.
Although that, I feel like, can be actually pretty powerful because it all has one central theme that can go into something else.
Because it is technically a Legends deck.
I'd probably put my Chandra tribal on this level, even though it's a good deck that can win. The fact that it's Chandra tribal is kind of janky.
But because Chandra, I feel like if it was like Jace tribal or Gideon tribal would be one thing, but because of Chandra, she's mainly just like burn spells and fire anyway, so you're basically playing mono red good stuff.
It's jank in spirit, if not in practice.
Exactly.
And just because we call something jank doesn't mean we're kind of insulting it, because jank has negative connotations.
Yeah, we've all built jank decks at one point in our Magic careers, typically when we first started, just because we're like, hey, we want to play Magic the Gathering. What's this Commander thing? Okay, cool. Let's just put these tons of cards in here because these are really cool, fun cards, not knowing that Lightning Bolt doesn't really do anything in Commander.
It does technically do something. It's 3 whole damage.
Yeah.
Yes, out of 40.
Bolt the bird.
Bolt the bird.
Bolt the bird. Hashtag Bolt the bird.
Our next level is casual. Little bitter that Aaron put me under casual, but it means commander precons. Things such as that, low-level decks that are better than jank. There aren't just like
random
thrown
cards
together.
tossed together. It's just one of those things that actually has. It has an idea in its
There's
head
an
of what it wants.
idea of
Yeah,
synergy.
there's an idea of synergy. There's an idea of focused that it wants to do. It's just the fact that
Yeah, it's more so Hydra tribal rather than things that scare me.
yeah, basically, like, you know, that's kind of just how that works out. The
Yeah.
reason why I put the actual commander decks as the example here is because we were talking about them last week and how some precons are a little bit stronger than others. For the casual Spectre, the numbers are 3 and 4, just because it's one of those things that the precons are simple. They're easy. You can buy them,
Yeah.
and then anyone can start playing Magic. Are you going to win 90% of your games? No, absolutely not.
Unless
You're probably
playing
going to
Windgrace or the Ur Dragon.
unless you're playing the stronger versions of those precons, Windgrace, Ur-Dragon. So we're saying Ur-Dragon is better than Edgar?
No.
I don't know anything about the Edgar.
I think
precon.
Edgar is
Edgar has
one of the most powerful
Yeah.
ones because
Well,
of
the
them
Edgar
its ability.
and Ur-Dragon were the same precon, or the
Yeah.
same
Yeah,
block.
but I would definitely say Edgar is the strongest of the four.
Oh yeah,
Tokens is tokens.
Yeah.
but dragon.
Bodies on the board.
Well, yeah,
that
but it's like-
quick,
Bodies
that
hit the
fast.
board. Let the bodies hit the board.
Let the bodies hit the board.
But yeah, so that's actually for the casual Spectre of it.
Our next level is Focused, which is most people's decks. It's how we personally build our decks, and it's how kind of the group speculation. Like if you go into a local game store, you sit down with a pot of strangers, you generally expect their decks to be at the focus level.
Yeah, focus number for this is going to be 5 and 6.
Ayula, Bear Tribe, definitely focused.
Most-
the Hydra Tribal. is a
Definitely
focused idea.
focused. Pretty much Imara. Now, although we say focus is one of those things that it can technically be a little bit further up on that scale. So when we say
Yeah.
5 to 6, it can be either low 5, like 4.5 ish, or it can be like the high focus, almost
6.5.
True. It's one of those things that a lot of, like Eric said, a lot of the actual decks that you'll first, in your local game store, just in your general pod or whatever, will naturally be around this area. The focus decks tend to have more targeted removal stuff, or focusing more on not just your own strategy, but how to disrupt someone else's strategy a little bit. And they'll have a little bit more answers to things that are on the board, as opposed to just saying, "Yep, that resolves." Can anyone kill this? Nope. Like,
Yeah,
no,
that's typically precons and jank don't really have answers.
yeah, they just, this is my deck, this is what my deck wants to do, I'm going to try my best to get there before anyone else. Basically.
The more interaction your deck has with the other decks, usually the higher level it is.
Which is kind of ironic, because when you get to like the really high, with higher levels that we'll get to, there's not as much of, you know what, maybe I'm wrong, because I don't play competitive.
We'll get to that when we actually get to that. The next one on the list, which is the second most powerful in our scale at the very least, is Optimized. Numbers for this are 7 to 8. An Optimized deck, basically, I actually wrote down here as examples, fetch lands, combos. Optimize focuses a lot more on what can I do to win faster, or what can I do to make my turns faster. Typically, when you're in an optimized deck, you leave out a lot less tap lands, you leave out a lot less, things that come in tapped or something, things that don't do anything once they show up. What is it, the Ayula Influence or whatever, the one you just start lands in order to get bears. If you're trying to make the Ayula deck, for instance, a better and more optimized deck, you'll probably cut that because it makes bears, which helps out your strategy, but how often are you discarding lands specifically to then get bears?
You make something like the Cloudstone Curio combo, where you bounce bears and get a bunch of triggers for you, making her big and making her fight everything.
Exactly.
And of course, the most powerful on our scale are competitive decks, which are a power scaling of 9 or 10. They typically win before turn 4. They are fast, consistent, they have their mana base completely optimized, no tap lands, as many lands that can fix their colors as possible. Shock lands, dual lands, fetch lands.
I also want to mention as well that where optimized, your main limitation for optimized decks and stuff in that sense is money most of the time.
Yeah.
Where you're thinking like, okay, money. where you're thinking like, okay, I want to upgrade my deck, I want to make it stronger, but money is definitely an issue. With competitive decks, money is literally not an issue. You'll go and just buy the fetch land and worry about paying it back later. That's how competitive decks work. They don't care about the price. One of our actual friends at the card show we play
Actual
at.
friends, unlike all our imaginary ones.
Exactly.
Isn't that right, Eric?
Yes.
Just a random disembodied voice.
Just Eric's not real.
This is just a voice we just added to the program. Anyway, Jeff actually is a competitive player, and he even mentioned to me like he doesn't even go near a commander unless the potential is over $1,000. Personally, that's a lot of money to me. So no,
That's more than I make in a month. Probably.
And contrary to what RJ said, there is a lot of interaction in competitive pods, but it's very tactical interaction. Everyone is holding up nukes and pointing them at each other, saying, "You go first," and everyone's holding up answers.
yeah.
So it's not uncommon to play land and pass in competitive pods.
In focus, in like jank and stuff in that sense, it's a lot of times you're just like, cool, like I'll play this thing. You don't really have to ask if it resolves. You just it kind of does. In focus decks and optimized decks, you might have to ask like, okay, look at the blue player. Is this going to resolve from that sense? In competitive decks, it's always a play something, look around. No one says anything, cool, play something else, look around. Like, because people will always have an answer and a response to do something. Also, too, with competitive, you can't just give a competitive deck to like a newer player and expect them to win with it because they're not going to know the interactions that need to be doing things.
Intimate knowledge.
yeah.
Another aspect of competitive Magic is fast mana. Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, the rituals
Yeah.
are all staples of the competitive EDH format. And competitive EDH is definitely a different format than standard EDH.
Yeah. In competitive EDH, they don't really care so much about taking a little bit of damage, like, here and there, in order to actually get their mana correct, because they're typically going to combo off or something in that sense,
Yep.
like 2 turns from now. So who cares? Like, I'm taking, like, 12 damage. I don't care. I'm just going to combo off and win with this degenerate combo, something in that sense. Eric has his Gitrog deck, and he knows, okay, this is like a sweet little, like,
Yep.
combo quick that then it just pings everyone to death.
Things like Sylvan Library, Bob, Necropones, yes.
That's another kind of just like more or less competitive-ish style card that you'll see in a lot more black decks, stuff in that sense.
All the lands that hit you for damage, like City of Brass or Mana Confluence.
Yeah. So now that we actually know what the scale is, let's talk about kind of going up and down in the scale. Just kind of going and looking back, for instance. So in order to actually jump from jank to casual, the main focus of that and how to do that is kind of just what does my deck want to do? Just by asking that question, you'll slowly see how to move it from jank to casual because you're like, this is my Amara deck. How to take it from just a bunch of cool green white cards to make it what it wants to do. Well, Amara wants to start tapping, so okay, let's put a few little tappers in there. Just by doing that small little change of like switching out 4 cards, that then kicks it up by 1 level. I also want to mention before we fully get into this that by switching around your entire deck, you don't have to go from like, I've got to remove like 99 cards. No, you're switching out maybe like 2, 3 cards, and that can change it. Granted, your whole land base, that's like 30 cards, but that's still switching out maybe like 4 or 5 of the tap lands for like burn lands, or ping lands, or even the check lands. And that will switch it to a different level.
Check, please.
One thing to note is that a deck's power and a deck's build are 2 different things and can be in different levels in the scale.
Yes.
I can optimize my Eula deck like crazy, but at the end, it's still Bear Tribal. And that's still going to be a low-powered deck.
Compared to something else like, let's say, Dragon Tribal.
Yes.
That's just how that works.
Yeah.
Bears versus dragons, typically dragons are going to win. Even the Dragon Precon versus his optimized bear deck, the dragons are still probably going to win because they're dragons. It's kind of hard for a bear to fight a dragon and live. But also, that's what makes Commander great, and that's the reason why I play, is because I can have this really cool deck that does this one awesome thing, someone else brings out something else that does their awesome thing happens first. It's just better than mine. I can tell you point blank, and Eric even knows this, I can't play Amara when he's playing his bears, because my deck literally just will lose to bears. Even though,
Really?
well, because whenever a bear shows up, he can just fight Amara, who's a 2/2.
Oh,
Yeah.
I never
forgot
pump
about
her.
Low power toughness commanders are really easy for Eula to beat.
Exactly. Now, I can semi-play SRAM if I'm fast enough, because there's other stuff in it that kind of pump them and make them stronger, make them indestructible and stuff like that, and so I can have a better fight at that. But with Amara, nope, just there's literally no way I'm beating that deck. Switching around from casual to focus, you're basically just taking out more of the things that you don't need that your deck wants to do. We mentioned last week with the precons, with the Aminatou precon, there was a random zombie general in there. By taking her out, I'm immediately making the deck stronger. Switching around from focus to optimized, same principle, just taking out a few cards, putting in some other cards that actually want the deck to do what it wants to do. Answering up bigger threats. Sometimes board wiping isn't always the best thing to do. Sometimes you want to have target removal. Like, you're saying, okay, I could Day of Judgment that one Platinum Angel, or I could just have to exile it instead.
People underestimate spot removal.
By a lot. Because you're thinking, oh, it's Commander. There's going to be like 4 different people. I've got to deal with a bunch of different things all at once. You kind of don't. There's usually only one main thing that's killing you or going to kill you at this moment. So just take out that one thing as opposed to killing your entire board. Or having specific styles of board wipes. For instance, Single Combat is a really, really cool new card that came out in War of the Spark that basically blows up everyone's creatures except for one that they choose. You might think, okay, well, that's really, really bad, but if you're versing a token deck, that takes out 90% of your problem right there. Yeah, you have to deal with that one additional thing, but it's a lot better than versing 20,000 tokens.
But then if you're playing against a Voltron deck, you're doing absolutely nothing.
Exactly,
Yeah.
which is the reason why most Voltron decks will actually run. That's why I run
Single
it in.
combat.
That's why I run single combat, because this way I don't have to worry about my one creature dying, because that's my main strategy. Optimizing for the most part thinks about what you want to do and how do I best protect my own thing while still disrupting the rest of the table. Which is the reason why I like it. In Imara, for instance, which is a token deck, there is Fell the Mighty, which basically states choose a target's creature and that everyone's power higher than that gets destroyed. Imara's a 2/2. We've already mentioned that. She creates 1/1s. I basically target her or the 1/1, everything with power 2 or everything with power 3 or higher dies. That's my main problems in the token deck. Cool, you've got a bunch of really cool dragons. They're all dead.
Yep.
There is another one inside of my Arcades wall deck, Slaughter the Strong, which basically states you choose out of all your creatures a total power of 4 or less. All my walls are 0 power, so I'm basically just choosing all my walls and Arcades, which is a 3 power, and then I get to keep my entire board, but wipes out my entire opponents. Optimizing chooses specific style of cards that deal with specific things, other than just a straight board wipe, that mainly help and focus on your strategy than anyone else. And competitive basically states, like Eric said, speed.
Yeah. Speed and consistency are the ways to make your deck more competitive.
Exactly.
They're almost always are combos or stacks.
Yay, stacks.
And the less to be said about stacks, the better. So, ways to move up or down the scale.
It's basically just lands. I feel like it's
lands,
Going from focus to optimize.
The
is
land
literally just
base
moving your
is definitely important. Less basics, more dual lands. Not
Not
dual
the
lands
dual
as in the original dual lands, although you can add them if you have them.
Yeah.
Shock lands, pain lands,
Fetch lands.
filter lands, check lands, buddy lands. These are all reasonable alternatives, well,
Also,
except for the more expensive fetches. Is it?
Explain to the people what a buddy land is, not because I don't know, but because the people might not know.
The buddy land is the ones that say this enters tapped unless you control one of a certain type.
Gotcha.
Which I also classify as a check lands because they're once they show up, they're looking around and checking to see if you meet the different credentials. I also want to mention as well the Battle Bond lands.
Yes.
Battle Bond itself was a set that was designed for Two-Headed Giant, which meant that you're always versing 2 different opponents. The Battle Bond land states this comes into play untapped as long as you have 2 or more opponents. We play Commander. We're always versing at least 3 different people at once anyway.
Yeah.
Those are always most of the time come in untapped, and they tap for 2 different colors. They're fantastic lands to put inside like an optimized deck or a focus deck just because you're
Utility.
guaranteed to get it untapped. Also, too, there are a lot of people as well that, although they do come in tapped, the cycle lands is what a lot of people actually like to do because
Yeah, it helps you go through your deck, reduce deck count.
I have every single
Up
one
the
of the
odds.
color ones.
Yeah, and
Slivers.
cycle lands are just good because if you don't need the land or something in that sense, you can just pay 2, toss it, and then go and draw another card. Some of the lands that cycle also have like basic land cycle where you can kind of just cycle it for another
Ash
basic land.
Barrens.
Yeah. Also look for the transmute cards as
Yes.
well. That say
They
like,
act
you know,
as tutors.
yeah, they say
Which
pay-
tutors are another way of increasing your power level.
Yes. Always being able to either find an answer to what you're looking for, or at least find a strategy or something in that sense.
Or find your combo piece.
Or find your combo piece. There's Demonic Tutor, Diabolic Tutor. There's too many tutors for me to put up on screen,
Yep.
but the most common ones are on screen right now. I also want to mention as well that as you're slowly upgrading your deck, putting in more and more expensive cards is kind of just how it works out. Cyclonic
Yes.
Rift being one of those. It's one of the most powerful blue cards in existence outside of Counterspell. Well, outside of Force Will, technically, but
Mana curves are another way of optimizing your deck. Do you really need that 7 CMC spell?
Yes.
Probably not.
it depends on what the 17 spell actually does. For instance, Platinum Angel is, I think, actually 7.
Platinum Angel is 7, but I run it in my deck
Yes,
because
but Platinum Angel isn't really all that good.
It's
a
not.
meme.
It's a meme, but that meme
But
with
I
with
run it-
You
lightning
should
greaves.
probably cut it.
I'm
Yeah,
not
but
cutting
that
Platinum
meme with
Angel.
lightning greaves on it, let me tell you.
This is about powering up your deck. You
Saheeli
probably
doesn't
should
care
cut the
about the
Platinum
hype.
Angel.
No.
Well, that's
it's
the
an
thing.
artifact.
If you're
creature.
going from casual to optimize, adding the Platinum Angel is probably the better bet because it guarantees at very least that you have more time. Because that's another thing about powering up your deck as well. Putting dangerous things on the board that people focus on as opposed to focusing on you. RJ mentioned this in one of our other podcasts. I have this thing where I'll just slowly start convincing people of other things. Like, oh, that's not enough, right? You should focus on that instead. Oh, that's not enough, right? You should focus on that instead. Well, by deflecting attention from you, it gives you more time to get to your combo pieces. Another thing about switching up and upgrading your deck is think about what your deck truly wants to do. For instance, Lord Windgrace. Would you rather put in a Llanowar Elves or Kadama's Reach?
Is Kadama's Reach.
Kadama's Reach.
Why not
Because
Llanowar
lands.
Elves? Lord Windgrace, Elf Tribal. What do you mean?
The reason why is because Lord Windgrace typically wants to focus on lands. He's a lands matter style commander.
Is he?
I know, right?
I didn't know
I'm surprised
that.
about
I
too.
never heard about this Lord Windgrace character.
Lord Windgrace? Black Panther, you say?
It's like
Yes. Is he part of the Avengers?
Yeah, right. But in order to become an optimized deck for the most part, I believe that you want to look at your commander and say, what do you want to do? And how do I help you doing that?
if your commander answers back, get help.
There's that too.
Yes.
I asked Windgrace, what shall I do?
And he meowed at me.
And he meowed.
Yeah. Terrible. Just terrible.
Meow.
And the same principle if you're actually powering down your deck. Let's say you have a competitive deck and you're playing it, but your player group is thinking, you know what, it really isn't fun to just you constantly winning on turn 5. Why don't you just try to power it down? And you're thinking, well, how do I do that? Just basically do what we just said, but in reverse. So take out those fetch lands, put in more tap lands, take out that
The
one.
tutors.
Yeah, the tutors, put in less, like just a random dirtle thing. Take out the thing, one of your combo pieces, but leave in the other half of your combo piece, something like that. For instance, there is the standard combo piece, which I personally hate.
Thespian Stage and Dark Depths.
Yes, just take out Dark Depths, but keep it Thespian Stage because it's still utilized as copying someone else's, like, Maze of Ith or...
Oh, it's a cool
Gaia's
little
Crater.
card.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, not even just that. I copy my Cabal Coffers, and then I double up on black mana.
Which is also, too, if you're running a Cabal Coffers
Herblord.
Herblord combo,
Yep.
take out the Cabal Coffers, but keep in Herblord because swamps are cool. It's something like that in order to power down your deck itself. One thing that I personally feel and how to kind of justify, you want to have all the decks that are at the table currently at the same power level. Like, kind of sit down and be like, okay, what's everyone's power level at? Or we're all at 5s, or we're all at 6s. You also want to have, if you can afford it, or if you're as addicted as we are, to have multiple decks at different varying levels of power. This way, you can sit down with someone that's running a precon and say, okay, I can pull out this deck, and it won't combo off on turn 4. Or someone else is playing, a really, really powerful 9 or 10 level deck. This way you can bring out that 9 or 10 later and say, okay, cool, let's go as hard as possible. You never want to win every single game. No. We all like winning.
Yes,
we all like winning. But none of us, I feel like we can all kind of agree on this, none of us will actually want to win every single game. Mm-hmm. That just becomes...
I mean, I'd like it, but I'm not going to.
But us too.
Eric's the one who has a competitive deck that just gonna put that out there.
But I don't win every time I play it.
Well, yeah,
Ashiok.
Yeah, true. We are talking to the guy who has Ashiok in his deck.
You wanna know why I put Ashiok in the deck?
Because
For this reason.
Yes. But since I'm disbanding my Gitrog, you're gonna have to take Ashiok out. Actually, don't do that. Ashiok's really good.
Ashiok's really good. Well, here's the thing.
No, take out Ashiok.
Another thing, since we're actually hopping on that target, the reason why I brought up this episode is because Amanatu is a deck that I built, and I really, really love her and everything in that sense, but I'm not playing her as much as I want to because she is a competitive deck. It's hard for you to actually find a play group or something that sense that wants you to play your competitive deck when everyone else is playing just kind of jank or just whatever they feel like, or even optimize something in that sense. So there are different ways of powering down the deck, but because it's Planeswalker based, it's going to be strong inherently.
That's also why I'm disbanding Gitrog, because I only get to play it every so often. Otherwise, it just collects dust in my backpack, and also playing competitive kind of wears on you because you're always walking a razor-thin edge between absolute victory or crushing defeat.
Yes, it's hard to have that deck just because you feel bad after a while that those cards are just going to waste, and they can be utilized better in other decks.
It should be known that just because your deck has a Guy's Cradle or one of these expensive cards doesn't necessarily mean they're competitive.
Yeah.
If you have Azori Elf Tribal with Guy's Cradle, I mean, that'll be a really, really good Azori Elf Tribal. But it's not going to be competitive because you're still turning cards sideways. And turning cards sideways is not competitive.
Yeah, typically with competitive, they either want to respond to something, answer something, or their space is going to combo off. Very rarely does competitive games end with someone dealing like combat damage or something in that sense. It's very...
The combat step is almost never, ever used.
Yeah.
And you're never going to listen to this, Rich, but hi. He has this Joyra Cheerios deck. So he just played like, Mox Diamond, Mox Opal, or not Mox Opal,
The Moxes are banned.
not all the Moxes, no. Mox Amber, Mox Diamond is a band.
the newer one.
The newer Moxes.
The newer one is
The legal Moxes.
Yeah.
Legal Moxes. Yeah. So he plays all those Moxes, any Cheerio artifact he can, just to draw a card, plays Metal Worker, and then gets an infinite mana and like just does crazy stuff.
Yeah.
And it's basically, they call it watching solitaire because you don't have a turn, he has a turn.
That's another thing too. You know, if someone's taking like a 20-minute turn and then they actually know their deck, they're just like going through the motion like, oh cool, I'll do this, and then this, and that turns to this, and that turns to this, and this and that. You know at that point that they're running a competitive-ish deck because there's an order to things. We mentioned Birthing Pod beforehand and a few times actually. Birthing Pod's one of those combos that it goes step 1 to step 2 to step 3 to step 4. There's a chain for it that you just kind of go up that ladder of I know what comes next. With my Amanatu deck, it's the same kind of principle. I know what I need to do first. Like, whenever I'm first tutoring, if I'm not in immediate danger, tutor for Oath of Teferi. After the Oath of Teferi, tutor for Liliana, to go then tutor for 2 other things. Felidar and Altar of the Brutes. Cool. If that combo doesn't work or someone interrupts that or whatever, cool. Now tutor for Ulamog instead. Or tutor for Ashiok instead. Like, it's one of those things that there's a pattern. I know exactly when I first sit down, how am I winning this game? Regardless of what anyone's doing, how am I winning? Eric knows his combo that's
And
how
I've explained it many times.
Yes. And that's another thing too. If you have to explain how the combo works and everyone dies, chances are you're playing a competitive deck.
Yeah.
That's just how that works. It's not just a general, okay, cool, so I just die. Like, we were playing with Prosh, and he does, like, this weird thing where he can just...
Food Chain, Prosh, Perforos. Infinite enter the battlefield. Infinite damage off Perforos.
Yeah, everyone just dies. Kiki Jiki and... What is that stupid card?
Helm of the Host? No.
No, it's not Helm of the Host. It's something else.
I forget what there are a lot of Kiki Jiki combos.
There are. The one I'm thinking about is actually on screen right now. It's like just 2 red creatures or whatever. It's Kiki Jiki and this other red creature that when a creature shows up, it untaps and whatever. It gets complicated. But
just get infinite Kiki Jikis and they all swing out.
Exactly. It's one of those things that something going infinite is always you're winning that way in competitive for the most parts.
Yeah.
Unless there's like infinite damage, in which case that happens too.
Although, again, just because you go infinite doesn't necessarily mean you can go competitive. Any deck with black in it can run Ashnod's Altar, Nim's Death Mantle, and have Baby's First infinite colorless mana.
Yeah.
But, and then exsanguinate everyone to death.
Yeah.
But, just because anyone can do that doesn't mean your deck specifically is competitive.
Yeah, I mean, going infinite on turn 3 versus going infinite on turn 8 is very different.
Yes.
Because once again, with competitive, speed is everything. You want to be able to doing as much as humanly possible on your turn as possible, period. It's just period. You know, we joke a lot of times where it's like, you know, like, okay, like land in the Soul Ring and the Signets, like in a casual format or whatever, we're just like, wow, like, you know, he's ramping, like, you know, Judge, he's ramping. But in competitive, if you don't do something like that, turn 1 or turn 0, you're losing that game.
Yeah.
There are too many 0 drop, you know, what's the Lotus Petal?
Lotus Petal gives you 1.
Yes, it is, because on turn 0, you have 2 mana.
Yes.
Like, because you put your land
Possibly
down.
more if you open with Soul Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Dark Ritual, the Spirit Guide, Simic, or Elvish, depending on if you're playing green or red.
Yeah, putting out your commander turn 1, that's the dream right there. Like, some commanders are not competitive.
Yes.
Most aren't.
Most
aren't,
honestly.
and it's hard to bring them into that light.
Feldegriff. No, I don't think
That's
you can make that
that's the
competitive.
group head guy, right?
That's the hippo.
That's the
flying
group
hippo.
Yeah, I don't know. You can make him like a
You can't make him
yeah,
competitive.
like make him competitive.
Can't
Maybe
make
make
him
like a weird
competitive.
like Voltron-y competitive, but
Yeah.
that's not even gonna work.
There's
either.
also things like the Urza and things such as that where you can't make them jank.
You really can't.
You can't
Yeah.
make a bad.
The value is just too much.
Yeah, so certain commanders aren't able to actually be jank
Competitive.
or like less competitive. For instance, like, you know, we mentioned Urza. It's really hard to build a non-competitive style Urza deck just because he flows so well with everything that you want to do ever. It's
Every artifact is mana.
Amanatsu, as much as I love her to actual death, I don't know, I feel like I can make that work. I would have to put a lot of money into it.
You
but I feel like I
did
can
call
make that work.
her a competitive deck earlier.
Yeah, but
That's the thing.
she's really not.
She's really not. She is basically optimized. She's like an
Yeah.
8.5. There's basically 8.5, or like a very, very low 9 on the competitive scale, just because I don't have any fetches in there. I don't have any legitimate, like, you know, land tutors or anything. Since I do still have a few lands that come in tapped. It's very powerful because of what the deck wants to do, which is basically play Planeswalkers. Planeswalkers inherently are powerful cards because they're an additional player that just shows up and does this crazy thing without using any mana. You put a bunch of them together, and yeah, it gets.
I think even with the fetches and all that in there, I still don't think it would break an 8. Some commanders have ceilings and floors,
Yes.
and you can't break through or break above them.
Yeah, which is fine. It's one of those
Yeah.
things that it keeps in its own realm where some commanders, you know, if it sits down at the table, it's not going to be as strong as humanly possible. Ur-Dragon is one of those commanders that I feel like can be competitive deck, just because
I don't. Well, it's so
you got Ur-Dragon out turn 5.
that no turn.
That's cool, but that's not
4.
competitive.
It's cool,
Three
but
or
here's
four,
the,
but it's not competitive.
But here's my point: the fact that he did that without having any legitimate fetches, without having any, like, you know, he got a bunch of tap lands. So in that sense, if he takes out all those tap lands, puts in actual, like, you know, Windgrace style lands,
You're severely not understanding what competitive means.
Yeah, no, it's that definitely cannot be a competitive because the way that you get a huge amount of value out of the Ur Dragon is by having a lot of dragons on the field. A competitive dragon deck would be Scion of the Ur Dragon.
I don't think any of the dragons could be competitive.
Probably not.
I know Ramos is competitive, but you know why he's competitive? Because he generates mana.
So
Having
the-
big scary plays and big explosive plays is cool and it wins you games, but doesn't make you competitive. You need combos that instantly kill people.
like some triplets. That is a competitive deck, just because it stops people from playing their hand, which basically in a competitive format, you're stealing all their best stuff.
I know the new Niv Mizzet's competitive. I know Golas
What,
is
4 color or 5 color numbers?
5 color, yeah.
It draws you potentially 10 cards.
Yeah. Drawing cards is typically a
Yes.
good indicative of competitive commander.
Like the Sliver, the first Sliver, he has combo potential because he combos with Food Chain.
I mean, it's like, first of all, it's just disgusting in general. Like, that's another thing too. Some archetypes, like slivers, are competitive by nature because they help each other. Slivers are
competitive.
I don't
be in
think
there.
any of the
Be in there.
slivers are on the competitive tier list.
No,
They're just-
the first Sliver. There's some
Really?
pretty crazy decks out there.
It's
Yeah,
got
no,
Well, it's because of
Cascade.
Cascade,
It's
yeah.
got
Cascade
Cascade.
and Food Chain
Eh.
and things such as that because you just cast him continuously and then you just play out your whole deck of all your cards because you may. I don't know exactly how you go about it. Well, I know. I looked at the deck list.
Let me guess. Infinite
mana.
mana.
Yeah, pretty basically. You play like Squee. You play that one blue thing that lets you play it from exile. You play anything that you can play from exile, and Food Chain.
Oh
and
yeah,
Tears.
Squeeze. Yeah. Oh, and I was wrong about competitive not doing combat stat. They can do combat stat
As long
if
as
they
you do
make
infinite.
infinite creatures that all have haste.
Or
Which
you-
there
yeah,
are several combos
Or
that do that.
Infinite combat steps. That's a
Yeah.
good one too.
Aggravated Assault, Sword, Feast, and Famine. Digio the Blade Blossom. Yeah, that's.
She can win on turn 3, turn 4.
I made a casual version of her, by casual, that's air quotes, that had tap lands, basics, and it still was oppressively
Yeah.
good.
Oh yeah, same with Slivers. That's what Slivers is right now. I have literally every single 3-color tap land in the game in
Yeah,
that deck. And
that's what I did too
and
with
the
my
panoramas.
Nagila deck.
No,
But
you're
yeah,
not. You don't
some commanders can't be competitive. Some commanders can only be competitive, or at the very least, it's really, really hard to make them not. It also depends as well on the player itself. I mentioned beforehand that you give a competitive deck to someone who doesn't know how to play Magic, or that hasn't been playing for very long, or something like that. They're not going to know what to do.
Yeah.
I don't know if you would
Or if you're
really-
Aaron and think the Ur Dragon is competitive.
Yeah.
It's a scary freaking deck.
My Air Dragon's pretty spooky.
So let's jump over to our favorite section, which is going to be last call. Last call.
Last call?
You don't have to go home, but you can't stay here.
All right, so final thoughts and the question to the people listening is, do I need to change my deck's current power level?
Yes, he does. Make them all worse.
Well, I'm changing Gitrog to Yarok, who won't be competitive, but still very strong.
Very strong.
But I'll be able to play him
Wait, I thought you
more
were.
often.
I thought you were changing Mojotha to Yard.
I'm combining the decks.
Ew. Anyway, I personally don't think I need to change the power level of most of my decks. Although Estrad is slowly creeping up there to being a little bit too strong. It's more
Because of all the control magic effects.
because of all control magic effects. But that's not control magic.
I really hate playing things against your Estra deck because they'll get stolen. Like that time you stole my Mind's Eye in my Chandra deck and didn't use it.
I use it a few times.
No, you didn't use it enough times.
I use it like twice.
Yes. And I hated every minute.
Basically, to answer the question of does it need to be powered down or do you need to power down your decks or anything in that sense, ask your playgroup, but only listen to what half of what they say. Typically, well, here's the thing.
Don't listen to RJ.
Here's my problem.
That's what he's saying.
Because here's
Don't
the thing.
listen to
because
RJ.
when you ask your playgroup, hey, is this deck too strong? Most of them are going to say yes because they don't want to verse it or it could legitimately be too strong.
Yeah.
But think about back into your head. For instance, Feather. It's a very, very strong deck, but that's also what Feather wants to do. It's really hard to build Feather weaker than what it currently is. So when I say power it down, that basically means like, maybe put like 1 or 2 tap lands. Also to think about, is this deck, out of all the times I play this deck, how many times is it actually won? If it's won about 50% of the time, then you're good. If it's won 90% of the time, maybe you should power it down a tiny bit.
And also be aware that your members of your playgroup may be uninformed about the power level of your decks. Like the Ur Dragon being competitive.
Oh my god, you're
You're
not going to
trying to
be
be
out that
competitive.
I'm not gonna let
You're
you
not gonna
live
live
that
that
down,
down.
Aaron.
I swear. Let's get Emrakul to throw it at your face.
Oh yeah, because you have it in every deck.
Emrakul's not competitive either.
No,
just
it's
so you know.
The old Emrakul could have. No.
Well,
I'm
the
saying
old
those are banned
Emrakul
ones.
not heading its own deck would be competitive, but
Yeah, that's the one
people
that
would
takes extra turn or
use
whatever.
the old Emrakul in their competitive decks
Yeah, take an
to
extra turn.
win.
It's a free extra turn. Plus
Yes.
Annihilator 6 or something stupid like that.
Yeah.
Annihilator 6. It's not even the most important part
disgusting.
of it. It's still like.
So let's actually jump over to the cleanup step where I say thank you so much for actually listening and watching this episode of the podcast. Right now we're roughly hovering around like 29-ish, 30-ish subscribers, which is awesome.
Don't lie. We have like 3. All fake pages I made.
Yeah, right.
And all our views are just me pressing
Yeah.
F5 on the video a million times.
That is terrible.
Going on all my servers, putting it on RhythmBot.
Thank you guys for subscribing to Servofax. No, I'm just kidding.
And this video wouldn't be possible except for Crazy Glue. By Crazy Glue.
All right, guys. We'll talk to you next episode.